So, every time the last time I gave a talk here, I gave a talk that was kind of completely over everybody's heads, and so this time I'm going to offer, at kind of as we get further along, a few practical things that actually you can just pick up and do. Mostly this is a manifesto, and then some of the very nerdly things I did getting there, and then some of the less nerdly things that other people can do to get there, or follow in my footsteps. I have been on the in cyberspace since long before that was followed by A/S/L, for those of you who know what that means. And some years ago, back in '98, I got interested in this kind of new dynamic website thing, and I wrote a little bit of Perl to create my website, or create kind of one of the early social media sites, which then became, at the time we called them microportals. They became blogs eventually, and so yeah, my sister loves to rub that in. So back in August of 1997, I was working at Pixar, and we knew Steve Jobs there, obviously. And there was this whole talk of he was going to come back to Apple. And so those of us who were into the kind of company politics thing started looking around for the websites, or the news on this. And one of the greatest kind of places to pick up all the gossip and what was going on was this guy named Dave Weiner, who had a website called Scripting News. And Dave was collecting all of the cool stuff, and he had a product called Userland, or the company was Userland, the product was Frontier, but it was basically a dynamic website generation thing back when that was kind of a brand new, wild, wacky thing. And I looked at that and said, or let's run through on that thing. So people looked at that and started to build their own little versions of it. Some people were running Frontier, some of us started running Perl. I wrote Newsboy, which Hotwired was using for a while, which was a couple lines of Perl that grabbed email inbound, formatted it as a web page, and stuffed it into the appropriate things. So you had archives and a main page and all of that stuff. And then at some point, Peter Merholtz, Peter Me, if any of you guys are into his kind of web design-ish stuff, he was creative director at Adaptive Path for a while, a bunch of other things, said, I've decided to shorten weblog to blog, and that name stuck. And Ev, who later gained fame in Twitter, from Twitter and from Blogger, took that and run with it. One of the things that I kind of still regret is that my little Newsboy tool, I looked at what Pyro was doing, Ev's company, and said, why would anybody ever give you give me the FTP credentials to log in and change their site? And of course Blogger did, and a couple $1 million later, Ev could take time off and build Twitter. So one of my kind of themes here today is going to be that when we trust the free media, when we trust Facebook and Twitter and all of these other sites, we're pushing all of our efforts out into an ephemeral space which will eventually fail us. And I ran across this picture of an old AOL floppy. This is actually from from 88. But if anybody, thinks back of, like, my sister right now is putting baby videos up on Facebook. And I seriously hope that she is saving that, because it is going to go away. But most people have existed on a web on which there has always been Facebook. So it's only us old curmudgeons who are screaming, no, no, it's going to die eventually. So this talk is about that. Here's just a quick list of the rise and fall of various empires. BBSs were systems where we would put our own computers on phone lines, and you could dial into our computers and use them. And that was kind of as CompuServe was coming up, and AOL Prodigy and all of those on the one side. The BBS network was becoming a quite robust set of systems. We had something called National Mail Hour, which was a time early in the morning when all of the computers would stop taking human calls and exchange mail all across the country. And that network got more and more complex, such that in Chattanooga, where we had a really diverse population, we had a computer which had, I think they had several phone lines on that computer. His long-distance phone bill was on the order of $3,000 a month. And then we had a second national or Chattanooga mail half hour when all of those computers would sit and exchange all of the local mail and get their feeds from the national system. So it was in the tail end of that era when I was trying to figure out, okay, how do we build this real time? Because we've got this time when the computers are all down, that I actually ended up founding an ISP because a friend of mine who I was doing a lot of business with said we'd made $8,000 the previous year and living on rice and beans. And he said, okay, we're going to start an ISP. I just signed the papers with SprintLink. It's going to cost us $3,000 a month for 128K fractional T1, but it's okay, we've got net 60 terms. So we had 2 months to figure out how to pay it off.
128K?
128K. And that just supported a shitload of dial-ups, and as long as we could keep people on local content like Usenet and email, we were using very little of that outbound. It was back before the web hit. We'd sell based on the web, but then we would, nobody would use the web. It was all email. So I'm here to rag on silos, these other systems that you might give your information to, build your marketing presence on Facebook, and eventually Facebook will say, hey, I can monetize that from you. And all of a sudden, all your traffic goes to zero unless you start paying extortion fees. This is a theme that has come over and over again, but the other thing is that these rise and fall socially. I'm starting to see the fall of Facebook. A friend of mine's daughter recently said, Facebook is where I talk to people I know in real life but don't like. Tumblr is where I talk to people I don't know but like. So these things rise and fall and move through, and they're always under the control of somebody else. They're also unreliable. Those of us who've been around for a while have seen GeoCities fail, all of these other sites where we give tons and tons of data to them, put a lot of effort into developing a web presence or whatever there, and all of a sudden one day they go. Even worse, the Ancestry.com had a social media site which was all about develop your relationships with your families, share your photos, share your stories. And they decided they were going to shut down, and so said, we're going to shut down, you have to download your content, here's a zip file. People downloaded that zip file and said, well, Ancestry.com, this is a well-respected company and an organization backed by the LDS Mormon Church. We should trust them. And so didn't open that zip file for months until after the company shut down. Turns out that zip file had only the pictures, lost all of the conversations, all of the family recipes, all of the memories that people had spent time putting into that site, having conversations with family members on that site. All gone. Silos, the Facebooks and such, are also evil for a lot of other reasons. You might have seen that Facebook is playing around with searching out keywords in your feed and showing you only like happy or sad news feeds from other people, and then looking at how you respond to that. You are constantly being A/B tested and seeing how susceptible to ads you are on those sites. There are a lot of people whose names online are not the names on their credit cards and driver's license, or may even be, but is not kind of the legal name. Mine's not, even though it's just a shortening of Daniel to Dan. But there are a ton of other people who have found all of a sudden that their accounts are locked and they've lost whatever presence they've built up on Facebook. There are also people who are finding that Facebook's real name policies are subjecting them to all sorts of harassment because they have built up a different persona online. That persona has value. They're not trolling people with it. It's who they are online. But Facebook comes along, says, whoops, we're going to swap out with what we've learned is your real name, and all of a sudden, bang, all that anonymity is gone. There's also a lot of content restriction stuff, and it's easy to say, yeah, okay, you can't put porn on Facebook, but you also can't put breastfeeding photos on Facebook. And there are a lot of other pernicious, subtle ways where kind of allowing a company whose business is selling you stuff via advertising to control how you're communicating with your family, it seems like the wrong way to go. And then the final thing here is I have put a couple things on Facebook over the years, and I'm picking on Facebook. This applies to Google Plus, all of the, MySpace, all of these various things. I can't go back and find any of those entries now. You can scroll back as far as you want and see some of them, whatever Facebook decides to show you that day. So, this is a manifesto calling for all of us to try to build ways to do this in a way where we own the content, where we can archive the content for future generations, for our children, for our nieces and nephews, in my case, so that we can read what we want and control how we read it, so that we can have the persona we want. I am a different person on Twitter than I am on Facebook, even though I use the same name in both places. Even though I actually use tools to post a lot of the same content to both things. And then there are a few other places like MetaFilter, where I have a completely different persona. It's fine if people connect those in real life, but it's a different me. And I'm happy to keep it separate. And then finally, avoiding lock-in. One of the problems with Facebook that anybody who's tried to do social media marketing has discovered is that you get too popular on Facebook, and Facebook starts saying, we're not going to show your content to anybody unless you start paying us money. And a lot of these are from organizations and companies that I really believe in, and I want to see everything that they have to say. And here's Facebook mediating the conversation between us. So, this is about trying to build ways around that. There's a community of us who are kind of hanging out in a couple of our IRC channels, occasionally going into San Francisco and meeting up. There's a virtual meeting that happens in San Francisco and Portland and anywhere else that we can get the video equipment to conference people in. And we're a diverse group. We don't agree on everything. I was actually hoping to get one of the startup folks from that here to do a portion of the presentation a little later on. It looks like he's not here, so I got to do it. Damn it. But we've kind of agree on a couple of things. The first is that principles over project centrism. Make stuff work. Don't throw everything into the platform. It's more important that we get systems interoperating than that we worry about what those platforms are running on. Code runs, documents don't. Make sure that when we propose things, that we actually know how to implement them. And design the UI and the interaction elements first, and then worry about the formats. And basically, all of this boils down to implement stuff, and we'll work out the details later. Sometimes it's a bad idea. I have my own fears, but that's how we're working on it. A couple of things about how let's skip ahead a little bit. So the one thing I wanted to pop up here is that it's really easy, just as you can log into Facebook, to grab a blogspot.com or wordpress.com, or even, as I'm going to demo in a moment, a withknown.com address. For right now, domain names are the best thing we have for identity online, and I strongly recommend that you have your own and maintain it, and don't let somebody like Blogspot or WordPress or whoever have it, because that will go away as surely as Facebook will go away someday soon, I hope. So, my first step into all of this, obviously I'm a hell of a UI designer. Back in 2009, I said, wait, why am I writing all of this crap to go to, or why am I writing this stuff differently for Facebook and Twitter and all of these places? I've got my nerd friends on Twitter. I've got people reading my blog, still a few of them, maybe. At the time, I think, at my peak, I had about 1,500 daily readers of my blog. Now, at the time I wrote this, I think I decided I was down to about 45. Now I think I've got 5. But, but it's useful for me. So I whipped together a little stupid web app that said, choose what you want to post to. You know, Twitter, Facebook, Flutterby, which is my blog. Web mention is actually something that isn't implemented yet, so I leave that unchecked. A password so that I didn't have to worry about writing user management code because I was too lazy to do that. My entry, and I have the number of characters I've typed. You know, as I said, real UX design, but I'm the only person who uses this. Browse a photo off my phone. Give the photo a name or default to a time. Tell whether I want to publish it now or sometime in the future. Save it. And boom, it shows up on my website. This was a picture from my bathroom remodel I'm doing.
I can relate.
Yeah. It shows up on Twitter, and if I were smarter about markup, I think in modern Twitter I could actually have it show up inline on Twitter. It shows up on Facebook. And then so other people are working on this project too, and recently, so we call this POSSE, or Publish, Own Site, Syndicate Elsewhere, as opposed to the other side, which is Pesos, which is Publish Elsewhere, Syndicate on our own site, so back things up elsewhere. This is actually the practical side of things, because unlike my hacking crap together with Perl scripts and stuff, this is a package that you can either purchase as a hosted thing right now or run on your own site. It's called With Known. It talks to a hell of a lot more sites than I do. It'll do LinkedIn and I don't remember all of the other ones because I try to stay clear of LinkedIn because I really don't need to talk to more political recruiters. But it basically gives you very similar functionality. So this is also that I don't have to actually make this all work on a live demo. So this is what it looks like on Known site after you post that status update. This is what it looks like on Facebook, and you'll notice something. This is something Known is doing that I'm not. There's a comment there. Known is actually smart enough to use another service called Bridgie, which will look for comments on Facebook and feed them back into Known. So, all of a sudden, I get all my likes and comments and stuff back on my Known site. So, as a tool for personal blogging, or even a tool for kind of company presences, if your company is the social media-ish sort of thing, something that can grab all of the stars, all of the responses from those other sites, seems like it might be something worth further investigation. The kicker is that it will also do this with Facebook event RSVPs. So if you're doing events currently with Facebook, you could be doing them with Known, and a little bit of terror because sometimes Bridgie doesn't work. These are all things that we're gluing together as best we can. And get event RSVPs back on your own site, which I think is frankly pretty cool. So how are we doing this? We are issuing RSS for formats which put that stuff in line in your HTML. We're trying, rather than, because what most people do is they simply take their site and reformat it into into XML, actually entity encoded HTML in XML, and publish that as an RSS file. Why are we doing that? RSS was originally developed to be kind of a headlines syndicator, and there's no reason not to do that with your HTML raw alone. So I'll drop back to that. I haven't done, let me skip around in this damn thing. One of the problems, so when I come talk here, where is that? Interrupt protocols. When I come talk here, it's usually because I get a call saying, help, we need a presenter. And I say, well, I have this talk I did for something else. Let me see if I can rework it. So this is something that was originally a 5 or 10 minute talk for Hack Sonoma, which was a completely different audience. So bear with me while I skip around a bit. So yeah, HTML is my API. Aaron Parecki wrote that today. And one of his points was that he was dealing with a system where he was spidering the HTML, and they came out with an official JSON API. And so he switched to using their official JSON API, and their JSON API broke, and nobody noticed. But the HTML site worked because people were using the HTML site. Similarly, I've done stupid things with my RSS feed, and it's been a couple days before somebody said, hey Dan, your RSS feed isn't updating. Oh, great. So that's why we're putting the attention on HTML. The thing that we're using for ins and outs is this protocol called web mention. It's an awful lot like pingback. I hate it. I think that we are simply building a, kind of like WordPress did, another DDoS attack vector. But we haven't run into the problems of that yet. We've got a couple of ideas for how to solve it. We're experimenting with it. If you want to play with it, we'd love to get more people in the network. The other cool thing is that we are putting these indie action tags around our post forms, so that if you are using the proper GreaseMonkey script, and I did not have time to install the GreaseMonkey script in my Firefox, so I can't demo this to you, unfortunately. When you go to my website to post a comment, it gives you a form which will post that comment first on your website, and my website will grab it from your website. So you get a record of all the comments that you've made on my website. Kind of cool. The other thing that y'all can do right now is, in terms of marking up HTML, there's this system called Microformats 2, which is the system we are using to add semantic markup to HTML. So if in your templates, you guys who are building websites want to start thinking about maybe standardizing on the stuff that's coming out of Microformats 2, then as we build more RSS or more replacements for the RSS syndicators and things like that, we'll be able to use your sites in place.
How does that work with schema and stuff like that? Is it just another format in there?
It's just a set of classes. So in this case,
So it's the classes, okay. It's
right?
like elements.
Yeah, and yeah, you can add your own, just add it on top of your own classes. So in this case, I have a. This is really gross, but this actually comes off of my website. The H2 class is the name of. This says you're about to get an entry. This says you're about to get a name. There's the title. And somewhere down here, here's the content. Very quick thing. And somebody who's using a feed reader that can read that all of a sudden gets a full text feed of my site with semantic markup. I talked about how much I loathe web mention. One of the things I'm doing is I'm dumping the OPML file from my feed reader out regularly and spidering all of the sites from that for inbound links. So when other people mention my blog entries in any of the sites that I read regularly, and that's a couple hundred in my feed reader, all of a sudden I see that they've mentioned my site. And other readers on my site can see it. It's a way for me to control inbound links so that I don't have huge spammers, because I read all of these people, I find value in their sites. So yeah, it's one of the things I'm experimenting with. Bridgie and with known. Bridgie is this tool that integrates with Facebook and Twitter and checks your entries there and then sends a web mention request back when things happen on them. And so it's how I did that earlier thing where I typed the comment into Facebook and it showed up back on my with known site. And with known is this thing that I was hoping that Ben Werdmuller, who's one of the principals in the company building it, would come talk to you all tonight, but he blew me off. Talk with him about that. Yeah. So one of the other things that I want to build personally is I'm already spidering these other sites for inbound links. I'm finding more and more that what I'd really like is a search engine that isn't optimized, for instance, with recipes to show me all of the Food Network stuff first. I'd really rather see the blog entries. So in my list of, when I have a weekend free to build something, is to take the thing that's currently spidering for all of these inbound links, drop that into a database file so that I can use a text search on that to show me what's available or what people in my network have linked to, and just have my local search engine.
Dan,
Yeah.
can you sort of pre-moderate bridging content before it dumps into your site to filter it?
It only does things that are occurring on your entries that have already gone out to other sites, but so you get that level of filtering.
Mm-hmm.
But like if people are commenting on are totally off the wall on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get all those feeds back right now. So far, it hasn't been an issue. Obviously, I think one of the things I haven't looked at the WordPress plugins, but I suspect that the WordPress plugins and infrastructure will drop back into the commenting system there,
Mm-hmm.
and so at that point, you can probably use those tools to do pre-authorization on things or filtering. So, not yet. I haven't delved into those tools too deeply. I'm more into the protocols, but yeah.
It looked like your feed was Discus.
My
Your
feed.
comments, is that pulling into Discus?
You mean? Let's see. Hang on a sec. Let's run back to that one. You mean? No, that's Facebook. This one.
There, yeah.
This is actually no. Or with no. So this is their site.
Are you sure
Or-
they're not using Discus?
Yeah,
They are?
they are not using Discus. In fact, I would have had this running on my self-hosted system, except that I upgraded Ubuntu this weekend and it broke PHP. And I'm not a PHP geek, so.
I was just curious, because you were talking about using your own systems, and Discus is one of those, again,
One of those,
distributed.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how they integrate with Discus. It would be really cool if they did. I haven't done anything with them because I implemented my own system for that, and yeah.
Yeah. I just know I have a lot of clients who are talking about the relationship between like Facebook interactions and their own, and is there a way to integrate those and how those different systems work in a way that
Yeah.
sounds like there's possibilities.
I think there are definitely some possibilities there. And if nothing else, so one of the tools that I use, man.
Sorry, I don't mean to
I'm leaping around already, so let's make this interactive. And I thought I had tossed some of the tools that I use in there. So one of the things that I use is a tool called FBCMD, and Facebook is trying to shut it down. But it has a large number of users in the disabled community. So, it's kind of one of those things that they're being passive aggressive about it. And eventually we're going to have to build tools that have more web front end UIs. But it's basically a command line interface to Facebook.
Nice.
So I do, underneath the hood, my little gross ugly UI there drops that into a database, and then I've got another job that runs every 5 minutes and says, hey, is there anything new in the database? And it just does an FBCMD status and then the text of the status, and that pumps it up to Facebook. And
Nice.
you can do similar things like read the comments on stuff.
Totally.
Or you could use Bridgie to grab it back out,
Yeah.
because Bridgie does, the thing that Facebook has been doing that to make this harder and harder is they really want you to use a web UI to access Facebook. So
Right.
Bridgie gives you that web UI to refresh Facebook occasionally.
Right.
So where the hell were we? Let's see. Yeah, search and syndication.
Dan, while you're already lost.
Yeah.
So I maybe need you to paint me a picture for how this would work. I have my blog.
Right.
I post a story about my goat head babies.
Okay.
And so then this goes out to a Twitter, goat head baby. This goes
Right.
out to Facebook. And then people in Facebook start commenting on it. Oh, you know, the brown one's cuter than the gray one or whatever.
Right.
So that comment comes back to my blog as a comment on the actual blog page. Now, if there is a chain of discussions, maybe people on Twitter are discussing it a little differently. How do those comment feeds interact or integrate? What's the visual presentation to someone who's following me on my blog? They see some comments coming in, or a comment thread coming in from Facebook, another one coming in from Twitter, maybe another one from, who knows, Instagram, Pinterest, or whatever. What is the, how does it look to somebody who's reading my blog page? How do they know that these comments came natively from somebody who entered them on my blog? These came from Facebook, these came from Pinterest, these came from Twitter.
So I believe that what Known is doing, let me go up and, that's a good question, I haven't pursued that far. So what Known is doing is it's putting this came from Facebook on the posts. On my site, because of the way I implemented it on flutterby.com, actually all of those things show up first and then all of the native comments show up second, and people don't like that. They post because they look stylistically different, even though my web design is nothing to write home about. People would prefer that it all kind of shows up as comments in line. I believe that with the plugins that people are playing around with for WordPress, they'll just show up as, sequential comments. So if somebody comments on Facebook, somebody comments on Twitter, replies on Twitter, somebody comments on Instagram, they will come back in the order, probably in the order that that Bridgie pulls each of those sources for it.
So you're saying there's somebody who's writing or has already written a WordPress plugin that implements these interactions and protocols?
I believe so. I have seen mention of it. I haven't. I'm not a web developer, except that I've been doing it. So I believe that yes, these tools are out there. And let's see. If you, what do we need? Well, I'll get there in a sec. So a few other things. I'm not convinced that the web is the right platform for this going forward. For one thing, I was recently looking through my server logs because I moved servers to a VPS which has far lower resources than before, and every once in a while one of these new startup search engines will come in and decide to download all, I guess, roughly 20,000 blog entries at once and out of memory my server and crash it. So I get to spend some time going back through the logs trying to figure out what was happening, because I'm a programmer, not a sysadmin. And there's an awful lot of stuff in there that isn't any part of a conversation. It's just a randomly, hey, we want this document. Well, that's great, but you just downloaded 5,000 documents in a row and you told me your user agent was Internet Explorer. This doesn't make any sense. So I would love to see something that goes beyond HTTP and says, I am this person or this identity, and this is why I want this content, and maybe we can have a little bit more of a conversation about it. Also, maybe we can have a distributed thing so that I can run these servers on my home network, you can run these servers on your home network, and we do a little bit more caching and moving around data. I don't know what that looks like yet, which is the distributed hosting. Also, I think domain names suck. There's no reason at all we have to be paying $10 a year or whatever for a globally unique domain name. I don't, I call my dad something different than other people call him, so there's no reason he can't have a private key, and I can assign a name to him and refer to him that way. So there's some identity issues to be worked out there. And yeah, reader control and encryption, I'm happy to have those conversations with anybody who wants to pursue this to a deep technical level, but I'm guessing most of you guys aren't that deep technical kind of people. So if you want a really good thread on why all of these ideas are doomed to failure, Clay Shirky, who is well known for, among other things, his observation that all institutions eventually lose track of their original site and become focused on perpetuating the institution, has a really good thread on Elo, another silo, of how long we've heard some of these, we need this, we need this, we need this, and it hasn't happened. Or the silos keep coming up. What can you do toward this end? Right now, if you just start moving your CSS towards microformats markup, then we who are playing around with the web can start using it to do more interesting search stuff or more interesting playing around.
You mean if we get a set of CSS codes like you were talking about before,
Yeah.
just start integrating them into our site?
Yeah. So,
Our
for instance,
themes.
that CSS code that I was looking at before. So, basically, microformats has a bunch of like semantic meaning
Yeah.
for things,
Uh-huh.
and so if you simply start giving your
It's like indexing.
your site semantic meaning, I can say, oh, hey, this web page is a bunch of blog entries, and here's the title for the blog entry, and here's a summary, and here's a link to the author's identity page, whatever that means. And so when I'm spidering it, I don't have to try to do some sort of sets of heuristics to find out where's the summary of this document, what do I show the user in the results page, stuff like that. You've already told me what to do with that. So it's something that for almost zero on effort on your part, I can get some value out of it. If it starts to take off, Google will find some value in it, I'm sure. It'll become part of SEO almost immediately if we start using it. So yeah, it's something you can do without much effort.
Is this a kind of what they call rich snippets approach?
That sounds like it describes what I'm advocating for, yeah.
Yeah, Google came out with schema.org a few years ago where they describe a whole bunch of the different microformats that are driving their rich snippets. They pull more from them for the rich snippets, but there's a bunch of different formats.
Google may already be using this, and I'm just late to the party.
Well, there's different formats. So there's one that's like a product, or one that's a review, or one that's a blog post, or one that's a person or an address. And so if you use those, then your search results are going to be a lot more effective. So like sometimes you'll see where there's got stars on it. I run a site where there's a lot of reviews. We introduced that, and now those specific reviews get way more traffic. Because just as human beings, you're looking at a bunch of search results. Here's ones that's got stars. Ooh, we're animals that way. And so the more you can mark up your content with microformats, the more effective it's going to be for all kinds of different uses, basically machine reading in the future. A lot of themes now will have that integrated into it for basic blogs and things like that for WordPress. But if you want to get more robust, it's worth it. If you're playing the SEO game, it's worth it to do all
I just did a dentist site. I have all marked up with microformats. It's like address. This is the phone number. This is the business niche, and so forth.
Excellent.
Yep.
Yes.
And there's actually 2 competing formats, so it's worth doing the research.
3.
Is there 3 now? So-
The nice thing about standards is there's so many to choose from.
Yeah, right. Line of the night. But yeah, it's worth it. There's a lot of value to be gained, and the overhead to do it initially, especially with the content management system, is minimal, and it's definitely worth it in the long run.
If you are doing personal blogging, and by that I include putting things on Facebook or Twitter or wherever, figure out a way to own it yourself. If nothing else, I have found that the ability to go back and quickly search my archives is extremely useful. There have been a couple times recently when my wife has said, hey, when did that happen? And rather than trying to scroll back through 2013 and Facebook and hope that they show it to me this time, I can do a few little keyword searches and bang, I know exactly when.
You know, you can download your whole activity history from Facebook,
Yeah,
and then you can search that.
yeah.
I think it's an XML format though,
Yeah,
so it's
I-
not super helpful.
Yeah, I also actually have a cron job running and grabbing the last 800 Twitter things and from my Twitter feed and putting them in an archive. So at some point I will have, terabytes of things that have scrolled across my Twitter thing. I don't know that I'll ever use it for anything. That's just digital pack rattery, but.
That's an interesting conversation too, though. What do we do with all this?
Yeah,
We're storing all this stuff, terabytes of data keep getting generated, more information than humanity's ever seen generated every year. Like,
I can, pop up my little search engine for my status thing and, show you what I've got there, but it's, yeah. I think that if you are doing web presences for a business right now, you are really not serving your customer well if you are making a Facebook first or a Twitter first or anything else first situation. Because of that aforementioned, if the site is still trying to find users, still trying to make inroads, they're going to be as nice to you as possible. If time has come for them to make money, they're going to come back and ask you for money to show what you're doing. And if you build your user base there, you're at their mercy. One of the things, archives are safe. I would love to find a better way to keep the baby pictures of my niece that my sister is putting up on Facebook. A friend of mine is into fine art photography. He's thinking a lot about how do I create image archives that are going to be good for 100 years. And that's not just a physical media thing. That's how do you read those file formats? How do you leave enough trails for that? One of the things that has gotten that I have tossed a lot of scorn on the IndieWeb camp folks for is they have this big push to prefer text files over databases. And I said, well, I've got databases going back to whenever, this is huge. And then I realized at some point I had set up a blog for a couple of kids in my life. Long story, but I decided to never have biological kids, and I get a lot of Father's Day calls. So I've had a lot of kids in my life over the years, and I set up a blog for one of them, and she came back a couple server moves later and said, hey, do you still have any of that stuff? And I realized it was in a database I didn't migrate. I'd migrated all the text files, but not the databases. So think about how you're storing things as you store them. Think about database backups in a text format so that you can do something interesting with them. Think about what you're going to pass on of the family photos that you're posting to Instagram or whatever, how you're going to give that to your grandkids. Because there was a time when it was a shoebox. It's not that easy anymore. And then finally, hack with us, and that doesn't necessarily mean write code. That can also mean come get together and talk about why UIs suck. Or how we can also bring the ease of use of Facebook or some of the other features of Facebook. One of the things that I miss most on my blog that I'm going to have to implement is a like button. How hard is that? But just the acknowledgement of, hey, I saw your comment, I thought it was really good, but I didn't really have enough to increase the conversation there. I need to add that to my own blog, and then I need to set it up so that it works across sites. Here's a bunch of resources. You'll be able to find this stuff later, or come talk with me, and love to continue the conversation.
I mean, are you kind of advocating a return to the BBS system plus fiber?
I think it's I think it's more. I think it's better than that. Well, better. I think what I'm advocating is adding the features that we have seen are so useful from Facebook and the other modern social media back into blogs. So I think if I were advocating going back to BBSs, I'd say let's bring back Usenet. Usenet failed for a whole lot of reasons, mostly spam related, spam and piracy related. So I don't think it's that. I think it's let's make blogs vibrant again, or journaling and personal websites vibrant again. And I'm also open to the notion that this is a fool's errand.
Are you using the term blog for like a Facebook update? Do you think that's a blog entry?
I do think that's a blog entry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that I feel comfortable with exchanging those two terms. Because blogging feels very different to me. It feels very almost like way more formal, like than a Facebook update or
I think this might have something to do with when we collective or respectively got involved in it.
Sure.
When I got into it, there were journalers who were writing these long form pieces. And the people who eventually got called webloggers back in 98, 99 were the people who were kind of more of a, hey, I saw this cool site and here's a few thoughts about it. And so that's why, yeah, to me, it's not the New York media kids who are writing their long form pieces on their personal sites.
I just think it's interesting to think about owning your own data and owning your own sort of real estate. It almost feels like a like grow local kind of feel, because right? It's a return to our roots. It's a return to we're gonna do everything home based because I got 35 up and down at my house now, so I don't need to use a cloud-based server like that.
Right.
Because most people are going to be pulling content are being local anyways. So we don't have geography as a restriction, and we don't have to use a gigantic network. And then I have more control over my data. People aren't doing, people aren't A/B testing me all day, which the real effects of that, nobody even knows what that does. But anything that we do know, that when there's stimulus to our brain that our brain doesn't understand, it causes tension, and that causes so the fact that that's happening on a regular basis is something to be really considerate of. Also, from a just flow standpoint, Facebook's hosting all this data, and that data costs X amount or X cents per day or per year to do, right? So they've got to monetize that in some way so that they can keep it going. And the ways that they monetize it aren't really always the ways that that I feel like I've opted into being monetized.
Yes.
Or even given the option to say, hey, a Pandora ad, if you don't want to be monetized, then pay $9.99 a year, right? Whatever it is. Pandora knows how to monetize you because they put the commercials on super loud, right?
Or AT&T with their new fiber rollout is doing if you don't mind us, I forget what the prices were, but it was on the order of 100 megabit or gigabit fiber for $150 a month. And if you don't want us to watch your web browsing habits, it's $200 a month.
Ouch.
Solid.
Wow.
Have you heard of Karma, the MiFi things that are shareable? So if I have a Karma device open and you're a Karma user, they yeah.
Fun.
And plus, I think there's a balance out with the upload download. So however much they equalize it out, and that equates to your annual fee. So interesting, really nice.
Yeah,
nice presentation.
There's sort of an edge to your discussion that feels like local web. When you're talking about these are the people who I want to swim in the pool with.
Right.
And I want to get from that pool rather than just this big one. And so can I find those edges if we're all managing it? It's I know where you live, so I can go and I can talk to you there. Not, we go and we meet at the pub, but we can have a phone call. We don't need to have a conversation at the pub where everybody's listening too.
Right. It's interesting that you put it that way. That two things that I often say that, back in the early days of the net, I got involved in the ISP stuff because I wanted to bring the cool conversations that were happening to the world. And what happened is, in fact, is that I brought the world to the cool conversations and destroyed them. And so, I am looking for, where's the niche? Where are the people who are like, no, I don't want to be involved in that mass conversation. I want to be involved in personal conversations.
Yeah.
And
But
then
bring what's great about those back to the conversations, like and interoperability with the
all of those
comments
same features that that my family, who is not a set of C++ slinging nerds like me, would engage in.
Yeah.
And then the other side of that is that I've been looking around for, okay, where isn't there a bubble right now? And I'm kind of back to, face-to-face communication, frankly.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know how to use my technology skills on that. But
Pupusas.
pupusas, yes. It all comes back to food.
Sharing food.
Yeah.
So, that's what, yes.
Question, you have a lot of going on with blogs and communication. Well, my current host company for the website, which doesn't mean I agree with everything they say,
Okay.
told me this. I don't have a blog yet, but I thought of one, maybe having a picture of some landscape I did or a kayak trip I did. And somewhere on that blog I said I wanted to have somewhere that my friends or anyone else who joins on there, I have this website with these high-tech products. Now they told me, this company up north, they said, don't ever do that. Google's going to punish you.
So I actually don't know. I know that over the years I have linked to a whole bunch of, I've got 20,000 blog entries on flutterby.com and some other number that on a more personal site. And sometimes I have pointed and laughed at various deep links, portions of sites. Every once in a while I will get an email from somebody saying, hey, this link is hurting my Google juice because Google thinks that I am playing games to optimize search results. So it used to be that Google would base how far up in the search results something came by how many inbound links there were to it. And what happened was that the content farms and the search engine optimizers set up these networks of thousands of sites, and if you paid the money, they would link back to this one page, whatever page you wanted to raise in the Google search results.
And I heard you can be punished and banned for life if you buy into any of those.
Right,
Google
so
will
what
find out
happened
and
was Google started saying that and saying, well, this isn't serving our audience, so let's punish people for it. And it is difficult to differentiate some of the early blog format kind of stuff, like flutterby.com, from some of those sites because we were passing around links and saying, hey, we think this is really cool. And so it was quite possible that there were a bunch of inbound links. So it is possible that could hurt your site. I also think that Google is pretty good about understanding or trying to understand what's a legitimate fan link. Hey, I really like this, and I'm a person who isn't trying to gain Google from what is. So
Google just announced they're coming up with a disavowal kind of system for so that you can basically go and say, no, that inbound link, that's absolutely not something I don't want you guys to say that I'm gaming or anything along those lines. So it's a little bit of a personal guarantee or something like that.
If they were doing what your provider says, it would be really easy for companies to bomb other companies.
Right.
So it seems unlikely that they're really going to be doing that as much as they say.
And the other thing is, back when I had a Google PageRank of 6, which I was told was something huge, and actually a friend's cat's webpage had a similarly high. Do you guys know Dory Smith and Tom Negrino? They're authors of JavaScript for the World Wide Web from Peachtree Press. And so, their cat was pixel.nu. Pixel had amazing Google juice because it was the example in all of their books. And so everybody would take their JavaScript and use that as the example code, and there you went. Yeah, so.
I do think that Google is getting smart enough that if you're trying to game it, they'll figure it out. But if you've got good content and you've got some actual readership because you've got some quality content, I don't think you're going to get punished too
The other
terribly.
thing is that,
I don't know, but
Yeah.
it just seems like that over time that they're getting better at doing natural language searching and seeing how much time people spend on your pages and some pretty.
I think
Big data.
Google is going to become less important in discovery too. Because, right now, there is so much on Google that standing out from that is extremely difficult. But if you're interacting with real people, they already know who you are. And so you're building a relationship with them. They're not going to go to Google for those parts if they know you sell them.
They might go to Google to find your
You.
specific URL, but they're typing in your name or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, out of 80 million results, chances of you coming up in the top
Yeah, I
page
mean,
are slim.
if you're selling computer hardware, you're competing with Newegg, Amazon, Best Buy. The first page of Google results is big companies. The second page of Google results is Chinese importers. And you're somewhere down around page 5 if you're doing really, really well. So if you're going to get traffic, it's going to come from someplace other than Google. So worry less about Google and worry more about building those personal relationships.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what I got. I got a lot of Perl code if anybody speaks Perl. I got some C++ code because I decided that I started to hate Perl and I'm writing my new web stuff in C++, which is kind of, super hardcore. But, yeah, there we go.
We like
Thanks, Dan.
CJack bin folders and everything.
Well, actually, still with that irrigation controller I talked about. It's like, okay, I have to have something running all the time to wake up and say, okay, I need to turn on valves on, valves off. And I've got to talk to that with some sort of protocol. So why don't I just talk to it with HTTP? So I wrote an actual web server to do that. So, yeah.